This is the video document for Rats vs. Cats. Rats vs. Cats is a top-down, tabletop war game based on strategy. Both sides must capture territories against each other or capture their opposing team's territory in order to win the game. The main mechanic is capture the point. Players can capture points across the map, specifically 8, one held by them at the beginning of the game, and the rest dotted around, equidistant to each other, and hold them to gather points. The aim is to get to 10 points, or, of course, to capture the enemy team's main base. Alongside, for the start of a turn, each player can move all of their pieces, but only have 5 action points. Why am I using an action point system? Well, I felt that there were too many things to keep track of for one player. Having 10 actions a turn can get very confusing very quickly. Specifying it down to a resource makes players pay more attention to the resource alongside giving another layer of strategy. These action points can be spent to attack, capture territories, or do piece-specific things, which I will get into shortly. A special rule about attacking and ranged attacks. Ranged attacks, you have to roll a d6 as I wanted to kind of split down the middle melee and ranged attacks. The d6 thing is similar to D&D. You have to roll over a certain number, which is on certain enemies, to see if you get past their AC or armor class. Melee hits, however, I wanted to prevent that, as I felt it was a form of... It was less risk for a player. It gives them a form of certainty with melee attacks. It always does damage, but ranged attacks are a bit of a chance, just so that the risk outweighs it to an extent. Best thing to do is to go through each character specifically, and therefore then I can specify on further mechanics. The rats. The first force for the rat, and the one that they have the most of, is the rat force. Rat forces are quite basic units. They're not exactly strong in anything. They have a ranged attack, which doesn't do a lot of damage, which is described as throwing a wrench in flavor text, but they can salvage. Salvaging is a universal resource held by the rat player. They can use this scrap that they get from salvaging to upgrade rat force pieces, as such on the side here. The damage resistance makes it so you take 1 less damage, or X amount of less damage per hit, and so on and so forth. The water mechanic, I'm not sure if I'm going to include yet, but I've left it here as a sort of devlog antique, in case it is included. Water would be hard to move through, but obviously the rat force could become immune to the deficits of water. Plague carriers are the second force. This fills up the other part of the roster. The plague carriers are more focused on ranged attacks and have a poison mechanic. When using their ranged attacks, cats receive poison debuff when they get hit, for damage halved, rounded down, amount of turns. This debuff lowers the chance of finding catnip, which is their form of salvaging, and halves their speed. The plague carriers do a lot more range damage as well, because we really wanted to specifically make it so that these guys do ranged attacks. It's kind of like they're supposed to be the backlines. And there's a special unit called King Ratty Rat Rat, which has an inspiration mechanic which boosts the damage of nearby rats. The cats have 4 forces. The Alleypocalypse cats, which are just, again, basic unit, but they can forage for catnip, which is another universal resource held by the cat player instead, which can be used for temporary boosts such as healing, damage, or movement speed. The second character they have is Nightmare. Nightmare is the ranged unit of the cats. I wanted to have something a bit different, so I made it so that psionics always... I made the ranged attack of Nightmare something a bit more akin to a spell. It always hits, however, has a chance to backfire onto Nightmares. The only way to undo the backfire is to use a catnip against it. The psionic can also be used as a boon. The Rampart Meowdera is just a tank unit. Can't do anything like foraging, but it's just very strong and also quite slow. And the Fat Cat is the King Rattarat alternative, another extremely tanky unit that can also forage. As you may notice as well, only the Rat Force are able to forage.